Welcome, everyone. Today, we're joined by Craig Gordon of Mainspring Energy, where he leads business development and policy and helps advance the company's fuel-flexible linear generators. Craig brings more than 2 decades of power sector experience, spanning utility operations, power trading, renewable energy development, and public policy. Before joining Mainspring, he spent 12 years at Invenergy and previously worked across several areas of Ameren. Craig, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Matt. Happy to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
For sure. Well, I want to start with your origin story. And if you can take us through a little bit of your experience and how you ended up at Mainspring. I love starting off these conversations with that because I think folks are just interested to hear how people got to where they are today.
Sure. I mean, it's all by accident. Of course, that's how life goes. So I fell into the energy sector after finishing an MBA at WashU in St. Louis. And then it just so happened to coincide with the implosion of Enron and a lot of additional scrutiny on energy players, utilities, trading, et cetera. So I landed into a credit risk management role at Ameren in St. Louis. And I did that for a couple of years and realized that risk management's cut out for some people, but I'd rather do other things, like be on the other side of the business equation and actually trying to get new things done. So I transitioned over to power trading on the unregulated side of Ameren and then worked my way up the desk, ultimately becoming a power dispatcher and then long-term power originator marketer. During that, the last couple of years there, I was the person at the unreg side that was getting involved in renewable policy in Illinois. The RPS had just been passed, and there was obligations for the company to comply with that on the retail side. So I was the green guy, if you will, at Ameren. That's where I was introduced to large-scale wind, and that's where I was introduced to Invenergy. And, long story short, I ended up joining Invenergy because I was not able to actually win PPA at Ameren at that time. So I thought, well, I would just make the leap over, start doing renewables instead of what I was doing there at Ameren. And then 12 years later, lots of water under the bridge, lots of origination activities. We did the first renewable PPAs with corporates. We did Google in 2015, Owens Corning, Equinix, a handful of those corporates. Some were physical PPAs, some were virtual PPAs, but I was running the sales and marketing team when we did those back in 2015. And then I also got involved in the policy side, state and federal policy. And by the time I was leaving Invenergy, I was leading the whole thing. And really with a focus at the time in 2022 of, working with other industry companies, peer companies, like the NextEras, the Clearways, the Intersects of the world to actually pass what became the Inflation Reduction Act in the summer of 2022. That's how my stint at Invenergy ended. And I had been recruited actually to Mainspring by a former Invenergy colleague. It was at that time when Senator Manchin was on the fence as to whether or not he was going to actually move forward with the reconciliation bill that would become the Inflation Reduction Act. When he was leaning no, that I was being recruited. And I was like, well, man, I'd like to join this startup because their technology looks really cool. So I made the switch right as the IRA was being hashed out. And it became law the second day I was on the job at Mainspring. And I've been here almost 4 years since.
That's awesome. And I want to jump into Mainspring and help unpack the technology for our listeners. When you listening to you talk about the IRA just makes me feel like that was eons ago. It's just unbelievable how the time flies by. Can you help us understand the technology and for someone encountering Mainspring for the first time, what does the company make and why does it matter?
So for someone who hasn't heard of Mainspring, and hopefully there's just few people left at this point, for those who haven't heard about Mainspring, what we're actually doing, we're building probably the most innovative piece of power generation that's been invented in the last 50 plus years. So several decades have passed since something as interesting and category changing as a linear generator has come to market. So it's this thing called a linear generator that we're building, and it's a fuel flexible, providing firm power. It's local, but it also has the efficiencies of large-scale utility assets like peakers, engines, aeroderivatives, better than aeroderivatives. So we're kind of just entering the moment now of coming to market over the last 5 years, introducing our generation to a power sector which has largely not seen a whole lot of change, with the exception being wind, solar, and storage over the last 50 years. So everyone's very familiar with nuclear and coal and gas. Well, our category of power generation is also runs on gaseous fuels, but it can run on natural gas, it can run on hydrogen, it can run on biogas, it can run on propane. So our technology is actually fuel agnostic, which really separates us from other types of generation available in the market today.
So was that the gap that Mainspring was designed to fill, Craig, back to its origin? Was it the versatility of having really any of those fuel sources that you mentioned?
I'd love to go back and get in the heads of the founders when they were first putting the technology, working on the technology, making it come together. I don't know what they were thinking this was going to solve, but I'm pretty sure they were thinking, this thing is really cool. And as they continued in the development cycle of the technology, they probably learned this thing can run on multiple fuel types. This thing is fully dispatchable. This thing actually can provide firm power, or it can provide backup power, or it can do anything in between. It's like, I don't know that they fully understood at day one how powerful the technology was ultimately going to be.
Yeah. Well, when you say linear generator, I want to break that down. If you're talking to a smart high school student, how would you explain linear generator?
Okay. Well, I'm going to break it down really simple, maybe too simply. A linear generator is just passing a magnet back and forth through copper coils, back and forth. That's all we're doing. So if you take away all the mystery, peel away the box, ultimately what we have are two translator tubes or oscillators, which go back and forth 13 times a second. They have magnets attached to them, and they're gliding back and forth inside of copper coils. And that movement is what induces electricity. It's hard to break it down any more than that. It's pretty simple.
I think you did a great job. And what were the technological advances that made the design commercially possible today?
So the cost of power electronics has really decreased over the last 10 to 15 years. And it's really the combination of power electronics that are used in EVs, they're used in solar and BESS, is the decline in cost of those, plus the advancements in software that our software engineers were able to kind of build over the power electronics, is really what enabled Mainspring's linear generator to be the generator that it has become, which is pretty robust. The idea of having a linear generator has existed for decades, but the challenge with the concept, and the reason why no one else could figure it out, decades ago, was because the capability of marrying software and power electronics to really control the location of these oscillators with respect to each other in time and space. So if you think about it, these oscillators really have to come together perfectly every single cycle, or they're going to get out of sync, and then the whole process falls apart. So our power electronics matched with software really control with a high degree of precision where these oscillators are with respect to each other, with respect to the reaction chamber, where the magic happens, where the force is created. And basically, that's what we're able to do that no one else was able to do beforehand.
It's really interesting. And I'm wondering what has changed in the market that makes customers more willing to generate their power locally, because this is a trend that we're seeing across a bunch of different technologies, right? Like not just linear generators. In your mind, is it just costs coming down or is there something else happening?
Well, clearly you have the cost of new technologies coming down. We're trying to rapidly bring down our cost of production year over year. So we're becoming more and more economic. In fact, actually today we're probably a less expensive power purchase than a brand new combined cycle. If you imagine a linear generator that, fits in a box, 20 feet long, 9 feet tall, 9 feet wide, has efficiency comparable to a massive combined cycle power plant, and we're cheaper today. Like, that's pretty remarkable for a company that's only been commercial for 5 years. What's really opening the doors for us right now is the fact that, well, all those large combined cycles are already sold for the next 5 to 7 years. And if a customer needs power next year because their load is growing, their utility is likely not able to provide that extra capacity because the generation is already spoken for. So the fact that we have a pretty big mismatch between supply and demand right now is the perfect opportunity for Mainspring to come right in and fill that gap.
Yeah.
And it just happens that we do it very economically.
Yeah, it's an added benefit for sure. So does Mainspring, in your mind, are you solving a capacity problem? Is it a timeline problem? Or is it a resilience problem? Or is it just a mix of all three?
I mean, right now it's timeline and capacity
Mhm.
for sure. Those are the first two. Like you get resilience thrown in for free with us. Most of our projects aren't just single unit deployments or installations. We're going to have tens or dozens or hundreds of these things at a particular project site. So you're getting capacity, you're getting dispatchable capacity. In the case of a data center, for instance, that needs 3 nines reliability, it's very simple math for us to just say, okay, you have a 100 megawatt load, you need 3 nines or 5 nines reliability. We'll just add a few more megawatts to the 100 megawatts, and we can guarantee you 100% uptime 100% of the time.
Yeah, no question. I'm happy you brought up data centers because
And we can do it faster.
speed to power. And the data center thing, I want to ask you about this because sometimes when we talk to backup generators or DER companies, it sounds like the argument is maybe we don't need to invest as much in the grid because you have these new technologies for on site power. How do you see that dichotomy of not presenting this as either or, but it's like we need to invest in the grid. And at the same time, we have these really innovative companies like Mainspring that can show up and power these businesses at a time where it's really hard to get power.
Yeah, we're not on any crusade that is out there to champion distributed resources over and above, grid investments. I think it is a both and. The grid needs to be reinforced. There needs to be large scale capacity that's added to it. And at the same time, you have very specific near term needs that aren't going to be solved with a 5 or 10 year grid investment plan. So we kind of need to do both. We're not looking to pick a fight with the large utilities. In fact, we want the large utilities to be our biggest customers. I mean, it would make no sense for us to go down that path on a big crusade trying to champion DERs above all else.
Yeah, for sure. It's an all the above decade, is the way I see it. Yeah. So, Craig, I want to shift towards when you mentioned, this is the most innovative technology in decades. What is it about the linear generator that outperforms engines, turbines, fuel cells, batteries, or maybe where does it not outperform? Like, can you kind of specify those differences and help the listener understand?
Well, I think I've touched on a couple of points already.
Mhm.
When you have a combination of high efficiency, full dispatchability, quick ramping, doesn't actually combust fuel in the traditional sense. There's no flame in our process. So you have very low NOx emissions. We don't require water and we're not loud. Like the combination of all those things is pretty compelling. And we're going to be better than aeroderivatives on heat rates. We're not going to use water. We're not going to use oil. So looking at different fuel cells, for example, they take hours and hours to kind of get them fully started and up to where they want to operate and park it in a high output range. Whereas it takes literally minutes for us to go from a cold start to being online. And then once we're online, we can ramp to full load from minimum load in 25 seconds. Like that's more similar to a battery than anything else. No other engine, no other turbine, no other fuel cell can do what we can on a ramping basis. Battery can do that, but a battery needs to be charged every night. We don't need to be charged. I think those ideas writ large kind of differentiate us from different technologies. And I don't want to go one by one because we don't have all day to do that. But I think when our customers are looking at us, they have their own pain points that they're looking to solve. Some of them might be speed. How much capacity can you get that's fully dispatchable? Can you give me a power system that I can have backup fuel on as well as taking natural gas off the pipe? We can do that sort of thing. Very few other technologies right now are able to deliver the multiple layers of value that we're able to at this point.
Yeah. Craig, I want to get into I know we don't have time to go through all the different projects, but can you point to one or two of them to help our listeners understand some use cases and where the real world deployments are happening, where the best case studies are, and what the commercial operations have taught Mainspring about reliability and maintenance in general?
All right. You might have to ask the second part of that question after I finish the first part. So my
Okay.
memory's not that good. We'll come back to that last part. So At this point, we have a full range of use cases. They're on our website, whether it's utility scale, grid power. We've signed a 48 megawatt contract with Utah Municipal Power Agency, and that project will be built next year. I mean, that's your classic utility asset, grid asset. It's going to connect to the wholesale market. It's going to be part of the generation portfolio of UMPA, and they're very happy about that. If you want to swing to the other end of the spectrum of scale, then right now we could talk about our Prologis project in the port of Long Beach in LA. And that project really came about we have 12 units there, 12 units that are paired with batteries. So I think there's 18 megawatt hours of batteries and about 3 megawatts of linear generators there. And the reason for that project was, well, Prologis had a customer, Maersk, who had ordered 96 electric trucks to run the containers back and forth from the port and distribution centers throughout the LA area. And the local utility there told Prologis that was all fine and great that you have all these EV trucks coming, but we don't have enough power to serve that load. And it's going to be years before we do. And when we do, we're going to charge you the millions of dollars it's going to take in order to do those upgrades. So that is a clear case of a speed to power issue. You have demand showing up. Demand is showing up on a boat in the form of trucks that need to be charged. So you have the speed to power issue. And then you basically have our first true microgrid application. And the system that we have with Prologis is fully islanded. There's no electric connection whatsoever to that project. So the whole thing is linear generators plus BESS. That also kind of illustrates that our technology marries well with other inverter-based technologies, whether it's solar, BESS, or wind, perhaps down the road. So two very different use cases, the same machinery inside the box. It's just how it's used is different. So that's kind of the versatility that you mentioned earlier is really valuable because we don't need to be making changes to our product based on what different customers need. So it's one product that we have multiple use cases, kind of like the Swiss Army knife of power generation.
Yeah, no question. And the second part of the question there, Craig, was on maintenance and reliability. So what have the commercial operations taught Mainspring about the importance of reliability and maintenance? Maybe some lessons learned there.
Customers always want to have their power, right? So the lessons are make sure that you have spare parts close by, that you have trained technicians nearby. It doesn't take a highly trained technician to do the limited maintenance that a linear generator requires. But what we have found is when you do a project that's 5 hours away from any other linear generator project, you're going to have a 5-hour delay in getting someone in the best of cases, and it could be longer. And then they need to have the replacement parts necessary to make the fix when they finally get to the site. So I think one of the things that we focused on the last couple of years is making sure that we have a critical mass of customers within a radius of kind of our different O&M hubs, if you will. And so we have different O&M hubs, at this point across the country, and they're growing by the year as the projects grow. I think that was a big lesson learned, that you don't want to be too far away from your customer.
For sure. I wanted to ask you about the fuels that these Mainspring units are running on, but I think you answered that already, which is pretty much all of them, right? All of the above.
Any gaseous fuels, we don't take liquid fuels. So that's not what we do. So gaseous fuels are generally okay. We want to make sure that they're clean enough to put in a linear generator. So like landfill gas probably needs to be cleaned up a little bit. Siloxanes, can muck things up. So we want to make sure that there's at least some minimum level of pollutants or contaminants that are not coming into the system.
Yeah. Like for hydrogen or renewable fuels, I imagine that it's a small percentage of the total share. So like what would it take for them to become a material share of the operating fleet?
I mean, I think we're probably a long way away from there. We have multiple biogas customers at this point that are actually running. Actually, we signed a couple deals in the last week for some more. So you have a smattering of wastewater treatment gas, landfill gas, dairy biogas. So we have all of that. We have all of it in California, and we're looking to do it in other places. Those use cases, those projects are relatively small compared to what we're thinking about going forward, which is projects on the order of magnitude of 100 or 200 megawatts, not 500 kilowatts to a megawatt. So when hydrogen's price comes down a lot, there might be economic viability then, but at this point, there's, first of all, not enough hydrogen to go around economically to even really even to try to make that work. There's not enough interest in the market either at this point. The hydrogen hubs that have been pulled back, we don't see that as a near-term market solution for us.
Gotcha.
We'd love to see it when it comes around, but it's just at this point, the costs are too high. The production of hydrogen is too low.
Yep. Understood. That matches pretty much everything that I'm hearing out there. You mentioned the scaling of the projects and now entering into projects that are hundreds of megawatts. So how have the customer priorities changed as Mainspring has moved into those larger projects?
There are some, similar themes that you would expect. How quickly can you get it? Delivering hundreds of megawatts is a different proposition than delivering 10 megawatts. So now you're like thinking about my supply chain, like how long it's going to take to get those parts, and how long is it going to take to build this unit? How are we going to, how long does it take to ship it? The whole supply chain, lead time, all that stuff becomes much more important as the project size grows. And then, of course, if you're dealing with orders of that magnitude, your customers are pretty sophisticated at that point, really sophisticated, and they want to make sure that there's a high level of reliability associated with it and that you can stand behind any guarantees that they need in order to, in some cases, turn around and resell the power, to a data center themselves. Definitely higher requirements on reliability, stronger real requirements, LDs for missing delivery dates and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And as far as we've been talking to a lot of DER companies on the podcast recently, and the question of islanding and what it means to run in parallel. I wanted to ask for Mainspring, what changes technically and contractually for y'all when a project moves from grid parallel to simply islanded operations? Like, are there operational or technical changes that need to happen?
There's nothing technical about the LGen that changes. It's more the balance of plant design. You got to make sure that you have the right balance of plant design that can handle either being grid parallel or switching over to grid islanded. And that's a level of technical expertise that I don't have. So I can't share with you exactly what that means. It adds some cost to be able to do both. But what really happens is your customers really don't want you to fail, because if you fail, they fail. And so the credit requirements, the level of overbuild is going to increase when you move away from the grid, especially if you're talking about a sensitive load.
Right. Yeah, because you're the line of last
You're
defense.
the only one.
Yeah. Right, yeah.
Yeah, you're the first and last line of defense to keep that thing going.
Cool. Well, so when you talk about the intersection, like when we think about a microgrid and the role that linear generators could play within broader microgrid, like thinking about batteries, renewable generation, how do they complement each other? And maybe there's some real world examples, or even like theoretically, how do the different technologies complement each other within a bigger microgrid? I'm thinking particularly like now with the data center question and speed to power, and I'm sure you're seeing a lot of deployment across the country.
Yeah. I mean, I think at the macro level, if XYZ hyperscaler wants to have on-site power or something quasi on-site power, but they also have pretty lofty environmental goals, they might be, bringing in power from wind or solar, either, physically or virtually, and then they're going to have batteries on site. And so if they're really sophisticated and they really want to reduce their carbon footprint, they could have linear generators on site. They could use hydrogen, they could use ammonia, or they could use natural gas because, that's, again, the go-to fuel at this point. And so our capability to firm that renewable power or to firm that power, recharge those batteries, I think sets us apart. We have the low environmental footprint. We have quick start times. Because of our ramping capability, we're able to kind of naturally fill the gap where a large data center might otherwise have turned to a much larger technology or a different type of technology. And because we're inverter based, we pair well with the BESS that's on site or the solar that's on site perhaps as well.
Right. Yeah, the pairing is a lot easier. Like for a data center customer, what do they need from a power solution that a typical commercial customer doesn't? Like what makes a data center customer unique in that sense?
Well, they just can't afford to go offline, and they're willing to pay to ensure that they don't ever lose power. I mean, I think that's got to be the biggest difference that's out there. I mean, power is power. It's like, are you willing to have your lights go off at night on a super hot day, or do you want to buy that extra layer of protection, that insurance policy, by having on-site power that's redundant? And so the odds of a blackout or whatever like that are almost zero.
Yeah. And for someone like you that's been working in this industry for a very long time and wearing different hats with different companies, how do you view this broader issue that, especially here in Texas, but I think it's a national problem where we have significant delays as far as interconnection and on-site generation is a responsible solution to that problem. But is it in certain cases, is it just moving that constraint elsewhere on the grid? How are you seeing that play out in real time?
I guess when I first got involved in the industry, 20 plus years ago, didn't really think too much about the grid. It was pretty much static, don't worry about the grid. Nothing's happening. Nothing this year, folks. And so no one gave it much attention. And then renewables started coming in, and they started renewables plus low gas prices plus no load growth basically meant, okay, now we just have substitution going on. We're going to retire these old plants, so we're going to bring in these new things. Net, there wasn't a whole lot of need for brand new transmission. Of course, ERCOT had the CREZ lines, was it 2007? Like that seems like eons ago, 2007 and 2012, like what, 7.5 billion? I mean, that was a recognition that all this wind was coming onto the system, out in West Texas, and there just needed to be a way to bring it into load. But nowadays, there's so much happening on the grid, whether it's from data centers, whether it's from developers building wind project or that solar project or this project. Like everything is more dynamic now than it ever was before. So it's really hard to isolate one distributed resource having, shifting the congestion from one line over to another line. Everything's at play now. Hard to pin it down. ERCOT's going this cluster process to study new loads, right? Like everything's a mess. And we're trying to figure out how do we make sense of this giant cluster of things happening simultaneously? It's not easy. And that's why you see FERC getting involved outside of ERCOT, of course, trying to create some clear guidelines on how the processes should work and prioritization of studies and who gets firm versus non-firm. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question or just going on, but I'll just stop there.
No, you definitely are answering the question. I think we're living in complicated times, not just in the energy world.
You put it much more succinctly than I did. So you should have said that. Wouldn't have had to answer at all.
No, I completely agree with everything you just said. And I think there is no silver bullet to any of these problems, right? Like it feels like we're living in a time of infinite demand, and everyone questions the queue right now because it just seems like an unbelievable number that we're dealing with when you just add up all the gigawatts that are asking to be interconnected. But at the same time, a lot of that is real. We've been having this discussion on this podcast for the last 3 or 4 months with a bunch of different guests who are all pretty much saying variations of the same theme, which is like ERCOT needs to do a better job planning for all of the loads that are coming. But at the same time, it can't plan fast enough because the speed is unparalleled. Like we've never seen so much load come online so quickly all at once. Like that's the key problem. We could accommodate it, but the challenge is the time period that we're dealing with.
If only there was something like AI to help solve that problem.
Yeah.
Load it into the computer and let it solve itself. I don't know. Maybe there's something there.
Yeah, I think there is. That's the irony of all of this. And we had Pablo on the podcast and asked him about that. And he felt like AI will be part of the solution moving forward. That was definitely interesting. But yeah, we'll see where this all takes us. I think nobody knows where we're headed. Well, Craig, when you think about, I want to talk energy policy with you because that's the space that we both work in. And for Mainspring's technology, what is the biggest policy barrier that you're facing across the country? Like what's having the largest effect on your timelines for the projects that you're working on?
I guess, Matt, I'm very happy to say that we don't have too many issues or obstacles. Like from an air permitting standpoint, even in places like California, We're well known at this point, and air permits aren't an issue, so we can get air permits relatively quickly. I think we've received air permits in Texas, inside of 3 weeks once upon a time. So, that's really not a binding constraint for us. Obviously everyone struggles with getting interconnected. That's really not been an issue for us either since until these days, until recently, we're really not doing transmission level interconnection. So we haven't really been impacted by the huge queues and the waits in places like PJM or California. So that really hasn't been an issue. We've been lucky, knock on wood, that there aren't a whole lot of policy headwinds that are giving us fits at night. Nothing's keeping me up right now on the policy side.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Well, so I guess I could reframe that question and ask you, do you think that the market rules today are assigning the value for behind the meter resources like Mainspring? Do you think that the value might be higher than what it is currently because of the market rules that we have set up? Of course, I'm thinking with the Texas frame, but you might have some other markets that come to mind.
And I'll be honest with you, I don't give that too much thought, whether the markets are going to give DERs the right value. They're probably not, of course, right? So it's really hard to value small distributed assets in the context of very large assets. And so doing that is not a simple proposition. So I don't know, companies like Base Power, maybe they're figuring that out, how to make money in places like ERCOT with their technology. I hope they're successful. And Spark Fund, I hope they're successful in doing their distributed capacity product. I think their first project really is in MISO and with Excel in Minnesota. I wish them the best on that. Whether those check all the economic boxes, I don't know. We haven't spent a whole lot of time at Mainspring trying to get value for behind the meter assets just on the face of it. We're always trying to find customers who need power for other reasons, not to just get a high valuation, in PJM or MISO or something like that. I think we are definitely moving toward a place in our company's progression where we are looking at PJM, we are looking at MISO, and we are thinking about, well, how do we make sure that on an aggregated basis, for a 50 megawatt project, we're going to be able to get a high level of ELCC. We don't want to be a technology that PJM has never heard of before, and as a consequence, gives us zero value of capacity. Now, we've already been in conversations with PJM. That's not going to happen. The question is, where will we start off and where will we end? And I think a very similar conversation will be taking place at MISO. The great news about our technology and what we've seen so far in our limited time of commercial operations is our portfolio is performing at over 90% uptime. Nothing performs at that level that's 5 years old. Coal plants don't perform at that level. Most things, nuclear plant being one big exception. Our technology, although still in its infancy stage, is performing at a level that's really unbelievable in some cases. And it's just going to get better from here. So, it's really amazing what the technology can do and how it's performing already. And we were able to attract our new CEO, Tom Linebarger, who had been the chairman of our company for the last year, but he was a chairman and CEO of Cummins. He was there for 30 years. And he thinks our technology is better than anything he's ever seen. He came out of retirement to come lead our company to the next stages of growth. That's pretty compelling. That's persuasive. And I think people are really excited about that.
You got me fired up. I'm ready to go. The 90% number is really impressive. Yeah, you're right. That's unheard of.
It's crazy high. It's crazy high.
Yeah. Well, I want to take this, Craig, to round out the conversation and wrap it up, more forward thinking and kind of where does Mainspring go from here? If Mainspring succeeds, in your mind, where will linear generators sit in the power system 10 years from now?
I really do think they are going to be pervasive throughout the power system. They will be locally sited at cold fuel storage locations. They'll be on Long Island as peaking plants, perhaps, using zero carbon fuels. They'll be on site at large data centers. There'll be grid scale assets for large IOUs. There's no reason Mainspring technology can't serve every customer class, solving the specific needs of that particular customer class or that specific customer. Like, it's just a matter of time. We're not going to take over the world, and we have a lot of room to grow. I do think we're going to have a place all throughout the power system. The efficiency is really good. The emissions are really low. There's no water usage. It's not loud. No big smokestacks. Like, the community opposition is non-existent. So, I mean, we have a lot of tailwinds right now. We have a lot of tailwinds.
Awesome. Well, looking forward to seeing Mainspring continue to succeed. And thank you so much, Craig. Thanks for walking us through the technology and helping us understand what it's all about. Looking forward to having you on again sometime soon. So thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Matt. I hope I answered all your questions.
You did. Thanks, Craig.
All right. Okay. Excellent.
Thanks for listening to the Energy Capital Podcast. If today's conversation helped you make sense of the energy world, share the episode with a friend and hit follow on your podcast app. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the usual platforms. For deeper analysis each week, subscribe to the Texas Energy Empower newsletter at texasenergyempower.com. That's where you'll find every episode, every article, and all of our latest updates. We're also on LinkedIn, X, and YouTube, where we post clips, insights, and ongoing commentary. Big thanks to Nate Peavy, our producer. I'm Matt Bombs, and I'll see you next time. Stay curious, stay engaged, and let's keep building a stronger, smarter energy future.